place where you can tell a man you're glad to see him go and he won't be insulted. You know what you want to do now?
Get out of here.
Well, I hope we never have to see each other again.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Johnny.
All right, take this. Mr. Holmes, I understand you're willing to make a statement?
Yes.
You realize, of course, that you don't have to. You have a constitutional right to remain silent.
Yes.
And anything you say here can be used against you.
Yes.
You have a lawyer?
Not yet.
Want to call one?
Not yet.
You're entitled to one.
I don't want one.
Just want to confess to a first-degree murder, is that it?
And explain why I committed it, yes.
Have any threats or pressures of any kind been used against you? Any violence or any promises made to you?
No.
You make this statement voluntarily and of your own free will?
Yes, I do.
This is off the record. You want a sandwich or anything? Coffee?
No, nothing, thank you.
You understand, of course, that I can't promise you any kind of a break for confessing. I mean, a lesser charge or a lighter sentence.
I expect to be acquitted, Mr. Parker.
It's my job to see to it that you're not. All right, take this. I'll interrupt you to ask questions from time to time, Mr. Holmes. Otherwise, you just tell us what happened to the best of your ability. First of all, state your name and address, please.
Richard Holmes, 522 Maple Avenue, this city. This morning, I shot and killed John Bostic.
State where, please?
In front of the state prison.
Did you intend to kill him?
Yes, I did.
Did you plan it?
Definitely. 2 weeks ago, I bought a gun when I learned that Bostic was being released from prison. I drove up there early this morning and waited until he came out, and then I shot him.
Why?
John Bostic raped my wife. Last August 4th, Bostic was tried, convicted, and spent exactly 1 year and 14 days in prison. That's not enough punishment for what he did, is it?
Go on.
Do you think it's enough?
I'm afraid that case has no bearing on this one.
It has for me. It's the reason I killed him.
Killing is against the law, Mr. Holmes.
Do you know what happened to my wife after Bostic attacked her?
No.
She's still in a mental institution. Nobody cares about that. They care more about Bostic than they do about the woman he destroyed. She's destroyed. That isn't fair. Melissa may be institutionalized the rest of her life, while he walks out of a prison after 1 year and 14 days. Now, I'm sorry, Mr. Parker. I don't care what the law is. I know as a man that what I did was right. The only thing I can't understand is why you, as a man, can want to see me killed for it.
That's my job.
I don't call what you have a job, Charlie. It's more like a sentence.
Well, they say the first 100 years is the hardest. Only have 93 more to go.
After which, if you're lucky, and if you've managed to make the right political friends, and your astrological star is in the ascendancy, you might, repeat, might, get promoted to division chief. That is if Walter Carr resigns.
What'd you do, call me here to take me to dinner or over the coals?
Both?
Now, it's been a long, hard day, Larry.
And so you're satisfied to spend the rest of your life as an underpaid civil servant?
Well, I used to want to run the 4-minute mile, but since Roger Bannister did that, I have to content myself with being the DA.
Assistant DA.
Well, what do you want me to do, Larry? Quit and join the Foreign Legion?
That, or maybe Preston and Preston.
What are you talking about?
We're tired of having you lick us in court, so we're buying you for our side.
What are you talking about?
You're a good lawyer, Charlie, and we're expanding. Ken and I can't handle all the work anymore, so we need a third partner.
Partner? I mean, you're offering me a partnership?
When can you start?
Start? Well, I haven't been this surprised since I passed the bar. Start. Well, gee, this is all so sudden.
I'm not asking you to marry me, Charlie. Just asking you if you'd like to become a member of the firm.
Well, could you give me a little time to think it over?
If you were a man who made hasty decisions, I wouldn't want you for a partner.
Well, I know how often I gripe about being an assistant DA. I mean, the pay and the overwork without the overtime. I mean, half the time you hate yourself for working so hard to send some poor guy to jail, and the rest of the time you hate yourself for losing the case of not sending a guy to jail. On the other hand, I like the job. You know, I'm used to the job. I'm used to the office. I'm used to the associates. Maybe I'm just in a rut. Maybe I'm just scared to make a change. See, I'm a pretty good prosecutor, but maybe I wouldn't be so good on defense. Maybe I'm just wrong for private practice.
And maybe you're wrong now.
Oh, I'm sorry I'm late. I just couldn't seem to get away. Oh, Charlie.
How'd it go?
Well, I don't know whether I better divulge any information till I find out how it went.
Ken, I can't tell you how grateful I am. And
Charlie,
how
you're in the
flattered.
firm, are you?
He's considering it.
Seriously, look, if you fellas want to discuss something in
No,
private...
Charlie, stay, because this concerns you as much as it does anyone else.
Well, I'm not in the firm yet, Ken.
I know, but you're handling the Holmes case, aren't you?
Well, sure, but I don't see what one thing has to do... Well, you fellas are not defending the Holmes case.
Well, I just told him we were.
That makes it a little sticky, doesn't it? Well, at least it's good to know that he's got the best there is to defend him. I mean, the poor fellow's going to need it.
What about you, Charlie?
Well, I'm going to do everything I can to get a conviction.
Even though we're representing him?
Well, I've prosecuted Preston and Preston clients before.
But you've never been asked to become a partner in this firm shortly before we were to be on opposite sides of the same case.
You mean you think there's a conflict of interest?
I don't think so. But a lot of people who don't know you as well as we do might, Charlie.
Do you think they might?
Oh, they might. Some people are always anxious to believe anything about other people.
Yeah. Couldn't you get off the Holmes case?
What Ken suggested.
And what you rejected?
Well, I'd feel pretty silly if I took myself off the Holmes case and then decided not to take the Preston offer.
You think you might decide that way?
I don't know. It's a question I dasn't even think about as long as I'm still on the Holmes case.
Well, das't you think about why you're so intent on prosecuting this case at all?
What do you mean, intent?
Well, I read all the afternoon papers about the case, looking to see how many times your name was mentioned. I still get a kick out of seeing it in print. Anyway, reading all that copy gave me a pretty good picture of the man.
And?
Well, I can see where Richard Holmes might be justified in what he did.
Well, he murdered a man.
I know.
And you don't think he should be tried?
Well, I don't know about that. I just wish you didn't have to be the one to try him.
Why? Because Larry Preston offered me a partnership?
No, because I'd hate to see him convicted by anyone, but especially by you. It's a big case, I know, Charlie.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there are going to be a lot of people who are going to feel the way I do about it.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be fighting all alone.
Mm.
And as a good little wife, I know I should be in there rooting for you.
Mm.
I'm sorry, Charlie, but I won't be. I can't.
You're still going to give me a little kiss after I come home after a hard day's court, aren't you?
Oh, Charlie.
Mm-hmm.
But what are you going to do about the Preston offer?
I don't want to discuss the Preston offer.
Oh.
What else is there to discuss? Well, whether or not in the light of that offer, I can prosecute a Preston client without embarrassing this office.
Sure you can prosecute it. I don't think you know how to throw a case, Charlie. Besides, you got no deal with the Prestons. They made you a proposal, but you're far from having accepted it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, I'm just thinking about it. Okay, I'll go to work on the Holmes case.
Only I think you ought to withdraw from it.
Well, you said...
I know. That you're as honest as they come. You are. That you'd do your best. Of course you would, Charlie. But knowing you, I know you'd do better than your best. You'd force yourself to. To prove to yourself your own honesty and that you're not throwing this case to your possible future partners, you'd be positively brilliant every step of the way. But make one mistake. Fail to call the right witness or ask the right witness the wrong question. Utter some word that would give the Prestons grounds to ask for a mistrial and let their motion be granted, or just simply lose the case. And you could never take that partnership with the Prestons. No matter how many years you waited, Charlie, there'd always be the suspicion of a payoff.
Suppose I win.
As well you might. Take a little doing, because it would be hard to find a jury that would convict Holmes. But you might do it, Charlie. Only you would be so anxious to prove your own honesty that you'd be overzealous in your duties as prosecutor, and that would not be fair to Richard Holmes. No man's prosecutor should have a personal stake in his conviction.
Well, why not? The defense attorneys have. A good fee, a lot of glory if they win, a lot of sympathy if they lose. The luxury of being on the side of the underdog every time, the benefit of every last doubt, of every last shadow of every last doubt, and a set of laws that give him and his client all the odds. And what's the DA got against all that? We got to meet the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. We got to find eyewitnesses. We've got to convince a magistrate and a grand jury before we can even bring the case to court. And we get no big fee, and nobody thanks us if we win. The people that we represent don't even come near us in that court. Half the time they hate us for getting a conviction against some misunderstood burglar or some mugger with an unhappy childhood. You know, the people never stop to think we're trying to defend them from that same mugger and that same thief. No, we're always the villains. Heartless, bloodthirsty, anxious to send people to jail for some sadistic pleasure. No, Walter, we get the short straw every time. That's why there's no such thing as an over-anxious or overzealous or over anything DA except overworked. And if that means that I have to work doubly hard to get a conviction on Richard Holmes, I'll do it gladly. And I'll warn Preston so that he can work doubly hard for an acquittal. And after we get all finished beating each other's brains out in that courtroom, I don't know what the jury's going to do. I don't know what the verdict's going to be. But at least we'll have the comfort of the thought that we came as close to justice as we know how to get.
All right, Charlie. You can keep the Holmes case on one condition. When it comes to trial, I want to be there as your assistant.
Well, that's like Yasha Heifetz wanting to turn pages for his accompanist. What are you going to do, Walter? Keep me honest?
Now, I'll keep you from making mistakes that might make you look otherwise.
I'm not quite sure what it is you expect from us, Mr. Parker.
Well, any information you feel you can give me about Mrs. Holmes' present condition.
Well, if her present condition were good, she wouldn't be here now, would she?
Dr. Finch, I'm trying to find out whether Mrs. Holmes is better or worse or the same as when she came here.
Will the degree of her improvement or regression have any bearing on her husband's verdict?
It might. The jury might feel a whole lot more inclined to show him mercy if they believe the crime he avenged resulted in her being institutionalized for life.
In other words, the closer she is to sanity, the greater your chances are against her husband.
Well, that's a bit of an oversimplification, Doctor.
But by and large, correct.
Yes?
Well, I'm going to ask you to decide for yourself. Go and have a talk with Melissa.
Well, I don't want to talk to her.
Why not? You afraid that you might just possibly find that her husband was justified in taking revenge?
No murder is justified.
Well, then perhaps your fear is that you will find her so deranged that a jury will indeed be merciful and your case will be lost.
Doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, but it seems obvious to me that the last person in the world Mrs. Holmes would want to see is a man who is prosecuting her husband. If she can take that, you'll forgive me, Doctor. I don't think she needs a sanitarium.
She doesn't know her husband shot her attacker. She therefore couldn't know that you're his prosecutor.
Why are you so anxious to have me see her?
Because I hope that you will be touched by her plight, enough to spare her husband's life.
I don't have the power to spare his life.
No. But you do have the power not to ask for it.
Hello.
Hello, Mrs. Holmes.
I'm terribly sorry. I don't seem to remember your name.
Well, that's quite natural since you never knew it.
Oh, thank heavens. I thought it was lapse of memory. In a place like this, that can be a dangerous sign.
Yes, I imagine so.
After a few weeks here, you won't have to imagine. You'll know.
Well, I'm not a patient.
No doctor, then?
No, just a visitor.
Very impressed. You must have great influence in high places to be able to visit Edgeview on a non-visiting day. Great influence or great fame?
Neither, I'm afraid.
You also afraid to tell me your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Charles Parker.
How do you do?
Fine, thank you. How do you do, Mrs. Holmes?
A little better each day, thank you. So Dr. Finch tells me.
May I see your painting?
Not very good. I've tried to paint that tree several times and just can't seem to get it.
Huh? Looks like it to me.
Lacks the inner struggle under that shaggy bark. Lacks the torture it must have taken for every inch to grow, to fight its way to the air and sun. Each gnarled branch fighting for every inch of space. And it wouldn't be interesting if it wasn't all misshapen and twisted, would it?
It would be another kind of tree.
Mr. Parker, whoever it is you're visiting is going to be wondering where you are. Who are you visiting?
You?
I don't like people to make fun of me, are you?
No, I came here today expressly to see you.
Why, we've never seen each other before, have we?
No, I'm a friend of your husband's. I just happened to be driving through on a business trip. He asked if I'd stop off and see you.
Oh, it's terribly sweet of you.
He also asked me to tell you that he won't be coming by to see you for a while.
Richard said that? Why?
Well, I don't know. He said something about a business transaction.
Richard's coming next Sunday.
I don't think you understand, Mrs. Holmes. He won't be here next Sunday.
Do you like chocolates?
Yes?
Richard always brings chocolates when he comes. I like the lemon creams best, but I have to hide them. People steal them around here. You see that man over there? By that tree? That's the orderly. I don't like the orderly. I think he steals the lemon creams. Look at him pretending he's not watching us. Next Sunday, when Richard brings the chocolates, we'll get them first.
Why are you doing this, Charlie?
Because I made the tragic mistake of driving out to the sanitarium to see Melissa Holmes, and I tell you, it's scary, Larry. What one traumatic experience can do to a lovely woman like that. She kept warning me that we were being spied on by an orderly, but there was no orderly there. There was nobody there. So I decided that right or wrong, justified or unjustified, Richard Holmes is going to suffer the worst kind of punishment for the rest of his days.
So you're ready to make a deal?
Yeah.
And you're not afraid of being accused of going easy on one of my clients?
The only thing I'm afraid of is doing more damage to Richard Holmes than I have to.
What sort of deal did you have in mind?
Let him plead guilty to manslaughter.
Are you asking me or telling me?
Manslaughter, too.
No, Charlie.
I'll recommend a light sentence. He'll be out of prison in a very few years.
No, Charlie.
Well, what will you settle for?
An acquittal.
Come on, I'm serious.
So am I. I think I can get an acquittal.
What, do you think he's entitled to it?
What I think doesn't count. It's what the
It's
jury
what the jury thinks.
Yeah.
Look, he murdered a man.
The man who violated his wife.
That doesn't give him the right to kill.
That's not for us to decide. That's for the jury to
Oh,
decide.
come on, Larry, don't play games with me.
I am not playing games.
Look, I've got a confession. I've got eyewitnesses. I've got motive. I've got intent. I've got a classic hanging case.
Then why are you looking for deals?
Because I don't want to hang him.
And because you don't like to lose? Come on, Charlie, you can admit that to me.
Is that why you think I'm doing this?
Name me another reason.
Well, maybe we're finding out about each other just in time.
Finding out what?
That we shouldn't be partners.
Because we disagree? That's the best kind of partnership.
Partnership or no, I'm not a sore loser.
Well, I'd better warn you right now, I am.
Yeah, well, when this case is over, you're going to be pretty sore.
For how much?
Larry, don't goad me. It's unfair to your client.
Are you still going for murder one?
You leave me no choice.
And if by some miracle you should win, how will you square that with your conscience?
If I win, Larry, how will you square it with yours? Motive. Deliberation and premeditated design, access, and execution. We will prove that on March the 5th of this year, Richard Holmes did with malice aforethought arm himself, travel to state prison, wait outside the prison gate for his victim to emerge, and then cold-bloodedly and calculatedly did shoot that victim, John Bostic, to death. His reasons for committing murder are not at issue here. The only issue is whether or not he did commit murder. The people will prove that he did indeed commit murder and that he did it with deliberation and premeditated design, which is nothing less than
Murder in the first degree? Ladies and gentlemen, the defendant is not a cold, calculating killer. He committed this tragic act out of a blind passion, out of a heated anguish over the plight of a loved one, out of a searing despair at what seemed to him a shattering injustice. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you are sitting in judgment on a human being, not a series of cold, hard facts. For the district attorney to prove motive, access, execution, and intent are not enough in this case.
What relationship, if any, did you have to the deceased?
I'm John Bostic's sister. I was.
Did you ever see the defendant before you walked into this courtroom today?
Yes, I did. About a week before my brother was to be let out of prison.
Did you recognize him at that time?
No, I did not.
Did he tell you he was Richard Holmes?
Oh, no. I would have recognized that name. He said his name was Mr. Woods. He was a friend of my brother John's.
What else in words or in substance did he say to you?
That he wanted to help John after he was paroled. That he had a job for him and everything. That he knew that John had reformed in the past few years. He knew that John had been in trouble with the law before. You see, John was bad when he was much younger. We all admitted that, even John himself. But after his last prison term, about 4 years ago, John came out like a new person. He said that the psychiatrist in the prison had helped him, helped rehabilitate him. And it was true. I knew that. Mr. Wood said he knew that, too. He was just tricking me, but it was true. John couldn't have done those things. Not anymore, Mr. Parker, I know. He wouldn't attack a woman or anybody. He wasn't like that anymore. But they lied about him because he had a prison record. Everybody lied. Everybody.
Your Honor.
The witness will please confine herself to answering the questions counsel asks.
I'm sorry. I really am.
Please go on, Miss Bostic.
I told Mr. Woods that I was so glad that there was at least one person still in the world that believed in him besides myself. I was so happy about that, so stupidly happy. So I showed him the letter that John had sent just that morning that told exactly the day, exactly the time that he'd get out of prison. He was counting the minutes. And I wanted to write him right back and tell him about the job and about his friend, Mr. Woods. But Mr. Woods talked me out of that pretty fast. I was so dumb. He said, let's surprise Johnny. And I was to stay home and fix him a big homecoming dinner. And he would drive up to the prison and meet Johnny at the gate with the good news. He met him all right with 6 bullets.
Under the same circumstances, I'd kill him again.
Would you tell the court and jury why, Mr. Holmes?
Because of what Bostic did to my...
Your Honor, the defendant's state of mind...
Yes, Mr. Preston. Objection overruled. The witness may answer.
Because John Bostic raped my wife.
When?
2 years ago, last August. August 4th.
Could you tell the court and jury, in your own words, what happened that night?
My wife was home alone when Bostic broke in and...
Objection. As hearsay, Your Honor, the defendant wasn't present at the time.
The witness is only stating facts that were verified at Bostic's trial, Your Honor.
Now, Mr. Preston is testifying,
I am
Your Honor.
merely answering Mr. Parker's objection.
And slipping in a little information along the way. Counsel should be warned against that, Your Honor.
My adversary should be warned that Your Honor is running this trial and not he.
You bet I'm running this trial, and I'm warning you two to cut it out.
Your Honor, I think it should be made absolutely clear that we are not here to retry John Bostic.
We don't have to retry John Bostic. He was found guilty the first time.
Fine, then let's just stick to this case, okay?
You can't separate them because this crime wouldn't have happened if the other crime hadn't happened. Cause and effect.
I appeal to Your Honor.
Why are you fighting so hard to keep this out, Charlie?
Because it doesn't belong.
Because he's afraid he'll be accused of being soft on this case.
What are you, some kind of a mind reader? How do you know what
I
I'm
have to
afraid
be a
of?
mind reader. It's the only logical, rational explanation.
That's your opinion.
Well, whose opinion should I go by? Yours?
No, mine. Now, first of all, I'm going to allow this line of testimony as bearing on the issue of the defendant's state of mind. Now, it may be irrelevant that Bostic attacked the defendant's wife, but it is relevant that Holmes thought he did. Now, second of all, even if I couldn't find any other grounds for allowing it, I still would do so anyway in the interest of justice. This is murder one, Charlie, and the defendant gets every break.
Why?
Because my wife was sent to a mental institution.
How long after she was violated was she sent there?
About 4 weeks, as far as I can recall.
And is she still an inmate in the same institution?
Yes.
Do you visit her, Mr. Holmes?
Every visiting day.
How often is that?
Twice a month, every other Sunday.
One last question, Mr. Holmes. Do you still love your wife?
I would die for her.
Is that why you killed John Bostic? Because you wanted to die?
I don't care what happens to me anymore, Mr. Parker.
Are you despondent?
Yes?
Since when?
Since the day that crime was committed against my wife.
Not since your wife went to a mental institution?
That only deepened my despair.
All right. What about the day you learned that John Bostic was going to be released from prison?
After only 1 year and 14 days? That infuriated me.
Well, then what, if anything, did you hope to achieve by shooting him?
Justice.
Justice? You knew it was against the law to shoot him, didn't you?
Yes, but I felt
You
that...
knew it was wrong, didn't you?
Not in this case.
You knew that to kill another human being was against the laws of God and man.
Yes.
Yes.
Then you knew it was morally wrong to kill, didn't you?
In general,
Were you at
but in
Bostic's
this case-
trial?
Yes.
Was your wife there?
Yes. She'd already been committed to Edgeview Sanitarium, but she was at the trial part of the time.
Do you recall who testified against Bostic at his trial?
Yes, my wife. She identified him. She pointed him out. She said, that is the man. And my next-door neighbor. She testified
The
to
first
seeing
time
him
the
run
neighbor
out.
identified him was 4 weeks after the event. Isn't that true?
Yes, but
Just
she
answer
had
the
all...
questions, please. And the neighbor turned out to be an old lady in her 70s, correct?
Yes.
Bostic pleaded innocent at his trial. He never confessed, did he? I mean, you knew that, didn't you?
He never took the stand. He didn't testify.
Well, you know, Mr. Holmes, that doesn't constitute an admission of guilt. No defendant need testify.
I am testifying.
You believe in our Constitution, don't you, Mr. Holmes? The presumption of innocence, the privilege against self-incrimination. I mean, you accept that, don't you?
Objection, Your Honor.
Objection sustained. Argumentative.
So, based on the testimony of 2 women, one in her 70s and the other mentally ill, you decided beyond any question of a doubt that Bostic...
I didn't convict him. A jury did. The Lord judged him.
But it was you who condemned him, wasn't it? It was you who decided to go above
Objection.
the law, wasn't it? It was
If
you
Your
who
Honor,
demanded a
please,
punishment
objection.
above the law, wasn't it?
Objection sustained.
Oh, don't bother. No more questions.
We will recess now until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. I will again remind the jury that they are not to discuss this case with anyone or among themselves until all the testimony is given.
All rise.
I'm afraid I didn't do my cause any good up there, did I?
Wasn't your fault.
Is there anything we can do to counteract it?
Perhaps. With your permission, I'm going up to Edgeview this evening and see your wife.
What for?
To tell her what's happened and see how she takes the news.
Are you going to tell her that I shot Bostic?
And that you're on trial for your life.
Why are you going to tell her that now?
Because if she's at all mentally stable, I'm putting her on the stand the first thing tomorrow morning.
You're kidding, Ken. I mean, you guys have to be kidding.
Charlie, we don't have anything but a good case going bad. We have to do what we can to stop the trend, right?
You're gonna drag a mentally unbalanced woman out of an institution to win a case?
Yes, to save a man's life. And your office did it a year ago to convict Bostic.
Come on, Ken, it's not the same thing at all. She can't do him any good. She wasn't an eyewitness to the shooting. But what's she gonna do? She's gonna make the jury feel sorry for her.
Don't you, Charlie?
So that's why you're doing it. And the only reason, huh? To wring the jury's heart. Boy, how cynical can you get?
Charlie, it's not cynical to try to save a man's life.
No matter what it does to his wife.
You think electrocuting him's going to do more for his wife? I just came by to tell you, Charlie.
Wait a minute, Ken. I'll still offer you a deal.
Such as?
I'll still accept a plea to manslaughter 1.
Charlie, that's no deal. Holmes is determined against that. That's no deal.
Boy, you guys are just determined to make me the villain of this piece, aren't you?
What does our putting Melissa Holmes on the stand have to do with you?
I'm the rotten rat fink that has to cross-examine that poor woman.
No law that says you have to cross-examine her, is there, Charlie?
Morning. Well?
She's here, Charlie, and she's going to testify.
Well, I hope you're proud of yourself.
I hope this won't be too much of an ordeal for Melissa.
Be as brief and as gentle as possible.
What about him?
He wouldn't dare cross-examine. He's too good a lawyer.
Morning, Richard.
I'm sorry, Melissa.
Don't be. It's so good to see you.
Do you know why you're here?
Yes, Mr. Preston explained it to me.
How do you feel?
Much better, thank you.
Do you feel up to this?
Yes.
All rise. Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. All those having business before trial, term part 33 of the Supreme Court.
He looks awful healthy to me.
The County of New York, draw near. Give your attendance and you shall be...
More than you can say for my case.
Be seated.
Call your next witness, Mr. Preston.
Mrs. Melissa Holmes.
Raise your right hand, place your left hand on the Bible. In the testimony you're about to give in this cause on trial, do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Be seated. State your name and address.
My name is Melissa Holmes. I reside at the Edgeview Sanitarium, Summerfield, New York.
Your Honor, I object to any testimony being taken from this witness. Her address alone testifies to her incompetence.
Her incompetency goes only to the weight accorded to her testimony, not the admissibility. Now, she may testify, and if you wish, you may cross-examine.
Mrs. Holmes, I know this will be difficult for you, and I ask your forgiveness. But do you recall an incident that occurred on August 4th?
Objection.
Your Honor, I am merely trying to prepare a foundation.
I'll allow it, subject to connection.
I remember the incident.
Do you recall on what day that happened?
Yes. It was a Tuesday.
And can you remember the date you first entered the private sanitarium?
August 27th. That was the Thursday.
Well, then there were almost 4 weeks between the day the crime was committed against you and the day you entered the sanitarium? Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, do you remember what happened in the days immediately following the crime?
Well, I was numb.
But you knew what was happening.
Oh, yes. Yes, very clearly.
And what was happening?
Well, there were always policemen in the house asking me questions. Asking me for a description. Asking me to talk about it. I was so ashamed.
Do you recall what your husband was doing or saying at that time?
Well, Richard was beside himself with anger and grief. He'd scream at the detectives who were there to question me. He'd call them all fools, and he'd yell that the criminal had to be found, and why hadn't they found him? Well, he never left the house day or night. He never left my side. I remember asking him if he didn't think that his firm would object to his being away from work for so much. And he said he didn't know and he didn't care.
In other words, he was terribly upset by what...
Leading.
Sustained.
Please describe to the court and jury how your husband acted during that period.
He was terribly upset. Even violent at times.
Violent?
Yes.
Now he's preparing the foundation for an insanity plea.
Physically
He'd be insane himself if he didn't.
Did you notice if and when these violent outbursts of your husband's stopped?
A detective came to our house one night. A detective that I hadn't seen before, and he said that they were holding a suspect who they were sure was the criminal, and he wanted me to go down to the police station with him and identify him. But I wasn't in any condition to go there then. I was still in a state of shock, and
What did your husband do when you refused to go to the precinct house?
he went. I had described the man to him many times, and he went with a neighbor, Mrs. Wheeler.
The neighbor who had seen Bostic escaping from your apartment?
Yes.
Then what happened, Mrs. Holmes?
Well, I don't know, really. I remember Richard leaving the house. That was the first time that I'd been all alone since I'd been... Well, I was scared and panicky, I guess. I don't really remember very much that happened then. I was becoming unbalanced, I guess, from fear and shame. I don't know, it's all vague and distant, that part of it.
What is the next thing you actually remember happening?
Coming to in the sanitarium.
You may cross-examine.
I hope you know what you're doing.
That makes two of us. Mrs. Holmes, as Mr. Preston has done, I too must apologize in advance for having to question you about distasteful and tragic subjects.
I'll try to answer your questions, Mr. Parker.
Thank you. Now then, you've testified that after you were attacked on August 4th, you were naturally in great mental distress.
Yes, I was.
But that it wasn't until almost 4 weeks later that you had your first mental breakdown.
That's correct.
On the evening that you heard that the police might possibly have apprehended the criminal, your mind snapped. Is that your testimony?
Yes.
Well, doesn't that seem a little odd to you, Mrs. Holmes?
Odd? What do you mean?
Well, I mean that the possible apprehension of the criminal had a greater effect on your mental stability than the crime itself. Doesn't that seem odd to you?
Objection. The witness is not qualified to give a psychiatric opinion.
It seems to me she gave quite a few psychiatric opinions during direct examination, Your Honor.
Oh, I think you'll find that is not so, Mr. Parker. However, I intend to overrule that objection. You may answer the question, Mrs. Holmes.
May I have the question repeated, please?
Yes. Can you explain why the catching of the criminal had a more violent effect on you than the crime itself?
Well, I don't know if I can explain. Well, after the attack, the tension was certainly mounting in me, and what with all the police and their questions and Richard's frantic state, I felt all sorts of strange feelings and emotions, but I fought them back. I suppressed them. I knew I had to remain whole and sane. I had to fight to keep rational so that I could help when the time came. And yet, when that call came through, that they'd found the criminal, it was sort of a release. As though all my defenses collapsed and came tumbling down. Isn't that understandable?
You felt safer now that your alleged attacker had been caught, is that it?
Yes.
Safer from whom?
I don't understand that question.
Well, I asked you who you now felt safe from.
From the man who attacked me.
Did you have any fears that unless this particular man were caught, that he might come back and attack you again?
Well, I didn't think that the same man would...
Well, then, from whom did you feel safe? From your husband?
What?
Was it that you felt you could now offer concrete evidence to your husband that you really had been attacked?
What are you saying?
Well, I'm saying that after 4 weeks of sanity immediately following the crime, there was no logical reason for you to crack up when you heard that your alleged attacker had been caught.
Objection. Mr. Parker is stating his own conclusions, not asking questions.
Sustained.
Mrs. Holmes, before this alleged attack took place, had you ever been mentally ill?
No.
Under the care of a psychiatrist?
No.
You were perfectly well mentally until this alleged attack?
Yes.
Or to be more accurate, until you heard that your attacker had been caught?
Yes.
Or, to be absolutely accurate, until your husband and a neighbor lady went down to the police station to meet your alleged attacker face to face. Isn't that when you cracked up?
Yes, I told you yes.
Why then?
I don't know.
Was it because you were afraid of what your husband might find out?
There was nothing for him to find out. He knew everything.
Well, were you afraid he might learn something at the police station?
No.
Mrs. Holmes, have you ever been violated before?
What? No.
But you were violated this time.
Yes.
By John Bostic?
I didn't know his name.
Did you know his face?
What?
Did you ever see him before he attacked you?
No.
Or since?
No.
Never?
Well, I saw his picture. They showed me his picture.
And yet later at the arraignment and the grand jury and again at the trial, you identified him in person. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
You came in from the sanitarium to testify, didn't you?
Yes.
What did you do or say when you first saw the photograph?
I said, that's him. That's John Bostic.
Do you know his name by then?
What?
Well, how did you know his name if you'd never seen him before?
I don't know. I can't remember.
Well, you've got to try to remember, Mrs. Holmes.
I am.
And tell the truth.
I am. Stop badgering me, please. Stop insisting. I thought I was through with all that. Why are you bringing it up now after 2 years? All those questions, the policeman in the house all the time, and the constant questions. I didn't commit the crime. He did. He did. They kept after me. Richard, too. Questions, prodding. Someone's face always in mine. What did he look like? How tall was he? What was he wearing? What was his color? What did you do, Mrs. Holmes? Did you scream? Did you try to stop him? I don't know. Can't you understand that? I don't know, and I don't care anymore. Just go away and leave me alone, all of you. You too, Richard. Just go away and leave me alone, because I can't stand one more question in this house. Sanitary. So serene, peaceful. Here they come again. The police and their questions. With pictures this time. Photographs. A face. A strange, ugly face. Get rid of them. Once and for all. I had to do it, don't you see? I had to get rid of them. Yes. Yes, that's him. That's the man. That's him. Then they left me alone.
Mrs. Holmes, was the man in the photograph the man who attacked you?
No. No, God. Oh, no, no. I'm sorry.
Hi, Charlie.
Hi. Well, waiting.
Say, we've got those partnership papers in the office. They're all ready to be signed.
Yeah, partnership. Well, the papers may be ready, but I'm afraid I'm not.
Still?
Not still, I think never. I'm sorry.
Why?
Well, I'll tell you. If I had been the fellow who prosecuted Bostic for attacking Melissa Holmes, he'd be alive today, and you fellas know it. DA who did is in private practice today. He's very successful. He's a very good lawyer, too, but we need good lawyers on my side. Anyway, that's my reason for turning you down. I'm sorry. And if that sounds corny, then we should think up a better reason, because I got to tell my wife something.
Jury's coming in.
Yeah. I guess I understand why, Charlie.
Well, that's because you're not my wife.
Members of the jury, have you reached a verdict?
We have.
What is your verdict?
We find the defendant guilty of murder in the first degree.
Oh, you haven't seen the last of me yet. There are going to be appeals.
Why? To change the verdict? The verdict was right. I was wrong. That's worse than any verdict or punishment, to be that wrong.
You say congratulations, you get a shot under the heart.
I told you I was a sore loser. I'm not going to congratulate you.
Thanks.
But don't feel so bad. We have a good chance on appeal.
Well, I'm going to fight you just as hard on the appeal.
I wouldn't have it any other way.